Okay, here we go. I'm Amy Jane, and we are going to get started painting a piece of fruit. We talked all about our setup. We got ourselves prepared and familiar with the way our paints mix. We've got our light, we've got our box. Wherever you are, we're going to paint. We're going to go for it. Let's have some fun. Start with our pencil and eraser. We're just going to lay in very, very lightly a basic fruit shape. I am doing an apple. So I'm going to just start by sort of looking. I'm always looking and figuring out where I want to place my apple. Take your time here and make very, very light marks. I want to consider, before getting into this, I want to consider the cast shadow. That is really interesting when we're doing this kind of realistic painting. So I'm going to start, this is the base where my apple hits the bottom. And apples are very simple. Doing organic fruits make it real nice and easy to lay this in quick. And we just have to think apple shape for right now. We're not going to do too much with this because these lines will get erased later on. But consider where the cast shadow goes. This is an interesting and integral part why we set up our light. And we're going to go with that. Place it anywhere on the page and think about the effect you want. Composition is what it's called. And you can think about how it looks, how big it is, how close to the bottom it is. Think about all these things. One more thing too. I want to think about where the box, here we're using the box, so I want to think about where the plane in the background hits across. You can adjust if you need to, but having that indication that there's a ledge there also makes this, that's what makes it interesting and exciting, and it's what realism is all about. And it's making me consider like how my cast shadow went too, because I'm noticing the cast shadow does not go up the wall there. So I have to reconsider some things. And as far as my shape goes, but don't make too many lines. Don't make them too dark. But I want to just give you an idea of how light you're working here. You want these lines very, very easily erased. But now we're going to grab our brush and we're going to stare at our fruit. I'm going to stare at my apple and I'm going to think first about where the shadow is. If you did the review, the top part is the light mask, the bottom part is the shadow mask, and I want to consider what that shadow mask looks like. We're going to start there. So I'm going to get a medium-sized brush, get a good amount of water, and I'm going to think about the colors. Now, shadows by nature are cool in color. And again, we did all of our mixing exercises, so we know that if my fruit is red, in order to darken it up, I'm going to go for the complementary color, which is green. But let's see, right now I'm looking at and here's where it just gets serious because you're wanting to create a very specific color on your palette. So I'm just going to keep staring at my fruit and I'm just going to do my best. We're going to, again, repeat this over and over again until we get it. And I do like to employ the two brush method here so that I can start grabbing other colors without worrying about mixing up my colors. But I want to consider all of what I'm seeing, the light and the shadow. So part of that light, and this brush doesn't hold nearly as much water. It's not an actual watercolor brush, so you can tell the difference of whatever you're using. If you ever get an actual watercolor brush, you're going to know right away that it's holding a bunch of water and it's easier to use. But I'm just using that for mixing purposes. And we're getting some yellow involved, some red involved. And of course, we're getting some green involved because green is the complement to red. So I'm going to go right in here and pick up some of this green, give it a good rub, get as much water as you need, and get some green going. I'll probably be able to do everything I need to do with just these colors and dip back in wherever I needed. I'm actually going to get a little bit of blue. Not a strong blue, just because I want to have that available. And I really want you to play around here. You're going to do some things and then you're going to think, oh, that doesn't look right. So you're going to redo it, okay? I have some experience and I know how my colors work. So I'm just going to create a color on my palette that I think could be really good to what I'm seeing. I'm going to squint at my fruit. When color is involved, you really have to squint to see where the shadows fall. My shadow just hits right at the back there. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to lay in a general. Now I need more water. You see what happened there? It was a scumbly effect and I didn't have quite enough water going on. Now to start with, we want to start lighter than we think because we can always layer up, but we can't remove. So there I'm feeling the water and I'm just thinking of the shape and my shadow that I'm seeing comes up. My light is laying kind of low. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. There is a lot more red there than I'm showing, but this is the shadow. And once you lay down a bunch of water this way, the page is gonna hold and you might have to wait for it to dry. But in the meantime, we're just gonna keep dabbing and testing and seeing what these colors do in a lighter way. And I won't really employ too much of the actual reddest red that I see until I get to the light masses. And I'm going to move slowly in. I'm going to remember that this core shadow is the darkest place. And already I'm going to want to let that dry before I start doing anything else. But I want to get a sense of what's going on with the table. So this is not the right brush to use. This is not a watercolor brush. It's meant for other colors. I need to set that one aside because it's not going to hold very much water. Here I need to take this really great natural hair brush and get a background going. And I know for a fact this brush holds a lot of water. So, and I'm just, I'm looking at a box, but I don't have to make box color if I don't want to. That might be boring. If you wanted to add a different color than what you see, that's okay, especially if it's just a background. But I'm just really loading up some water here because I know my page is thirsty. I have a thirsty page. And I want my background to appear bluish. So I'm starting out with a little bit of burnt sienna or burnt umber, that is. And I'm going to get some blue going in here. And that's a nice ultra blue. It's going to really dim it down and not make that blue too strong. I might even go for some purple. Yeah, purple makes it look, it's really going gray on me too. But water this up, get a lot of water. Happy with that. Try not to bleed. See how the color is going to bleed. So I'm trying not to do that when I mix on the palette. Now I don't mind if a little bit of this green comes in, but I really don't want them to mix here. And water has a mind of its own. And I could use maybe a little bit more blue, and that is going to be strong. Yeah, that's good. Water it up here. Come in with your background image, shadowy area. And here, it's going to start to bleed in, but I'm okay with that. And I know that it gets darkest right up under there, but I'm going to indicate my cast shadow first off. Now you see what happens. Lines get blurred, and that's okay. I'm going to also indicate my horizon line, as we'll call it, where table meets background. And I really want this area here to be bright. That's where I see lots of light hitting. I see lots of light hitting up here, but I want to give a nice contrast to what's happening on the top of the apple as well. So here's where our line comes into play, because I'm going to actually really consider the shape of the apple right up around here. That background is going to define what the apple is, or whatever fruit you're doing. It's about defining without using a pencil line. We can erase those pencil lines. Now, here's the way it works. We're going to let this dry and come back to it. This is how it works. If you're in a rush, then you're not going to do very well. But I have to let this dry, and I'm seeing a little too much water pooling here, which I don't mind because I know it's going to get dark down there, but I don't want it to take too long to dry. So I'm going to mop a little bit of it up with a paper towel. This is just a general lay-in, and I'm trying to leave where I know it gets light. I'm trying to leave that for the end, for the next round. Keep your page flat and hit your pause. Use that pause button now, and we'll get right back into this. Think about don't mess around too much, because you really do need it to dry. Use pause. Go eat a different piece of fruit. Don't eat that fruit. Go and take a little walk outside and water your garden. Look at a tree or watch a bird. You know, birds live everywhere. Hit pause. We'll be back. So that was approximately 10 minutes. May take yours longer or shorter. It's not totally dry, but it makes it so that it won't really run and bleed as much. Now we're going to think about the light masses. We're going to use the brush that doesn't hold too much water. And if we go over what we just did, it's okay. It's just going to make what we just did look a tiny bit darker. But remember, we only have the white of the page. So we need to start this way kind of slowly. And then at the end, we put in all the little finishing details and it looks amazing. So we're thinking super light right now. We're thinking about what is happening in the lightest part. I'm going to think yellow. Brightest yellow. And we can think in layers as well, but we want to mix. Again, I always suggest not ever taking color right out of the thing. It's just not as interesting. So as I'm staring, I'm seeing yellow. I'm also seeing red. I'm just going to mix a couple yellows together because I want to keep it real light, and just touch a bit of red. There's some green and stuff there too, which we'll get into, but by starting with yellow and making it really watery, I can come in here and think about the lightest part. And there's this little place where the stem sits. And like I say, if it comes over the top of what I'm already working on, that's okay. I also see a lot of yellow happening in the background, or the tabletop where my apple sits. So I'm going to get some yellow going in that too. Get a lot of water and lay this down some yellow. You know, and sometimes I do want to make that choice not to let it go over, because it will change the appearance of it. But you can see how it sort of takes shape, it takes form, and we're just making these large washes of color. We're going to think complementary colors later. But for right now, And now we have to let it dry again. Watercolor. And I want to get a little bit of the, I'm going to try to get a little bit, recreate my color there. Shadow color, apple shadow color, just a hair, a bit in this place. And I want to strengthen that with more pigment because there's a lot of water there. And it's a very fine balance. But this dark place right here is going to be key to making our apple look very realistic and very nice. And then I can also come back over some of the darkest places that have already dried. Thinking about my core shadow, which appears a little darker. Thinking about the pit of the shadow, which definitely appears much darker. See how in order to make the dark, I'm going in from the red to the green. Because I'm on top of the apple right now. And I don't want a strong line there, I don't. But I also want to consider what the reflected light that bounces up as well. So I don't want to start to undo things. And then we have to wait again. And while we wait too, I can try and finesse a little bit more of the tabletop pigment. To try to get this to come in and appear a bit darker. But you see, I've actually made a mistake here and I've gone too quickly because it's going to bleed into my light mass. And I'm going to think about the highlights too. I can come in here and think about where it's the brightest because that's where we want to just be able to use our paper. So we're just going to let that sit. We're just going to let it go. And we have to come back to it once it dries. Maybe 10 more minutes each time. But we have to wait. There's nothing we can do. And this part does take a little time. But once it's over and done with, it's going to look great. And there's got to be some other little chore where you could just stare at it. You could stare at your actual apple. Let's hit pause again. So now this is dry enough. And at this point, since I have my basic shape laid in, I'm going to come in with my kneaded eraser and get just very lightly and very gently, I'm going to get rid of those very light pencil lines that we made before. I don't want to see those anymore. I'm wanting the watercolor to be the star of the show. And you may have to, I'm finding that I have to actually get my eraser a little bit harder to get rid of them, but do your best. Go nice and easy on that, but get rid of those pencils, all that graphite that was on there. It should come out. And we'll continue working. Now, this looks, when you take a step back and you look at it, it looks actually pretty good. But we are now going to start thinking very finesse, a little bit more vivid colors, because this is just our general shape. And I want to grab a smaller brush, not quite that small. I want to grab a bit smaller brush to start doing some more details. One that still holds a good amount of water, but I can use a point, and I'm going to try to keep the colors that I mix separate because I don't want them to bleed in together anymore. It's going to be more difficult now to try to manipulate them. But we're, again, lots of experimentation going on here. And I really want to start bringing out some of these amazing appley colors in whatever fruit you're using. Because I've got some wonderful, amazing red I'm not afraid to mix, get some yellow into it. And if I need to clear the spot, then I take my paper towel and I can keep two different spots from bleeding into each other just by running it along there. So I can keep this for my brightest appley red colors. And I'm going to come in here and start to really indicate and think about what's happening on the form of the apple and start slowly layering some of these real amazing looking reds and things. And my apple has some spots and things, and we're going to think about that, but we're not going to concentrate too much of it. But I do want to concentrate on the form that the apple is taking, and always where the light is, where the brightest places are. You know, some of these reds are going to come out real strong and I can just dilute them down. But I want to think about not having too much water on my apple at this point. But I do want to start thinking about prominent colors. And if I get to a point and I think I would really love a color to be there, what I would then do is squeeze a little bit of tube paint out so that I could use it fresh and it would help to give a more prominent look to. But I'm just sort of dabbing in some color here because I want to show that this apple has some really delicious red parts. And it has some texture, and I want to start indicating. Think about the form when you do this. Think about how the apple is formed and the shape of it. And still always concentrating on the brightest place. I want to grab some green color, and whatever fruit you're doing, you're going to have different types of colors, but you're always going to be mixing, thinking about complementary colors, but try to get what you want to create. Now, I know for this green, I need to make it really, really diluted because I don't want it to be super strong. Right up along here, there's some, and I'm very happy with that. And I know there's some great green. I think I need a little bit more of this kind of yellow. But some of these green parts are in the brightest highlight, so I don't want to get too much of that going. But I'm just going to think green, and I might get some strong color, but then really water it down. And add some of that bright yellow to it. Yellow is a great thing to add because it's not going to take down my value. Knowing that I'm in the light mask there makes it so that I have to be careful. But green is something I want to indicate here, right around where the pit falls. And you know, I do get my finger involved quite a bit because the finger can act as a great tool because your brush holds water, so wherever your brush goes, water follows. But your finger doesn't hold any water. So where your finger goes, you can then actually smear. And it is actually a smearing motion, but it's not going to add more water to the surface. And I know it looks real dark right here. But when I see that happening, I don't want that to happen. I use my paper towel and I just have to wait for it to dry. There's no other way around that other than waiting for it to dry. I'm playing constantly with the shadow side and the light side. Thinking about all those principles, all those things we talked about, and creating these layers between the two. There's a transition here. There's a very green transition here. And I want to try to get that in there too. The apple is a really nice play between greens and red, which are complementary colors, right? But we're going to introduce any color that we want. I tend to stay away from black. Blues and greens and reds mixed together make the most beautiful black, and we can go with that. But once our surface here is dried. We can use what we've got to get a little detail going. And I want my... And am I going to possibly make a mistake? Of course I am. Of course. I will definitely make mistakes. And is that okay? Yes, of course. Because are you going to do this like we've done everything else? Are you going to do it a bunch of times? Yes. Yes, you are. Now, I want to blend here, but I know that this brush has a little too much water, so I dab some of the water off so that I can take the shadow color that I made that I'm really happy with, that went over the apple there, and I can blend without as much water, because I know if I squint at it, it all looks right around that area. It looks to be the same color, but I want to indicate tabletop with a slightly bluer shade. And again, we're going to have to wait, and we're going to have to go back in after it's dried, or else these things will just start to bleed. I know that this part right here is going to be really nice and fun, but right as is right now, I can't do much to it because there's a lot of water up there, and until it dries, it's going to have to remain that way. And I'm constantly thinking about where the light falls, and I can be careful. Don't do too much. If you think about it, just stop, wait, let it dry, come back. Don't just sit in what they call noodle around, because you might end up hurting it, or things will start to run and you'll be out of luck. So just use some caution here. Don't be too cautious, but and if you have to start over, start over. But it's about layering. This is a layering process, and I need to leave that top part alone. I'm getting way too much. I'm not getting the right kind of thing going on up there, so I need to leave this top part alone. Just make my shape here, and come back to that one's going to need some work, some help. But I am very happy with my cast shadow. And I think while I'm in here, I need to get a little tiny a bit, not the reddest, fullest red, because it's in the shadow side, but there is quite a bit of red and yellow going on in there. So I want to get a little bit of that into just before I stop and let it dry. Okay. And again, it's about trying to see through the color and trying to get more of an indication of, just like the egg, of the shadows and things like that that are happening. And we're going to stop, and we're going to come back. We're going to use our finger if we feel like it, and our paper towel, and then step away for another minute. Use a hairdryer if you can. Don't get it too hot, and be careful. But a hairdryer can help speed it up. But otherwise, just have patience. Just wait. So we're back in again, and really I want to make this color pop right now. So I'm limiting the amount of water I have, and I'm getting lots of pigment. And I'm mixing a couple of colors together, and I'm just going to go for it. I know that it will get duller, but I see some appley colors going through here. And I'm going to try to manipulate them. I don't want them to look like a pencil drawing, but I'm going to keep the amount of water that I'm using at a minimum. And I can use the two brush thing that I love to use and add a little yellow, mix a bit of yellow and green in a more watery way, and get that going around the edges, and try to just manipulate each layer, one layer at a time, but keeping the value, keeping constantly thinking about and squinting at it, and think about where the light is, where the shadow is. And I can let the water help me here. I know it's a tough medium. It's hard to use, and it wants to do things on its own. Once you lay down some water, you got problems, you got issues, but you let it happen, and you just go with it. and try to just be patient in between each layer and keep working at it. You use it for what it is. It's a very finicky medium, and again, it's a challenging thing to use, but go with it. When something looks a certain way because the water reacted or did something, just go with it. Just go with it. There's a real good indication here of apple indentation, and I need to indicate that. I need to say that is part of the apple that is, and I need that to be more green, and I'm going to do the red in there, the complementary color, so that I can make the apple appear different than the background. I think that's one of the most important parts, is to get the apple emerging and choose your background color wisely. Get your background acting a little different than your apple. And it's going to take practice. It's going to take something that you need to do over and over and over again. But by laying down some prominent color, I'm very happy with that. I want more prominent yellows because when I stare at my apple, I see them. And it's just, you're sometimes just playing back and forth. I want this yellow to be real prominent. And I've made some of these dirty, so I'm going to actually clean them. Maybe just a touch of green. The color is the brightest right up here. And there's more things happening. And I get my finger involved. I always do. Because it's a good tool in my book. I want some more yellow going on. Send it down into my shadow, which I'm not going to play with too much right now. And I want just a touch of green. And use what's on your palette too. I mean, getting these, you need a prominent color, but I feel like I need a good little touch of green in there to show that my apple is cohesive. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to have to stop. I'm not going to be able to just keep going. I'm going to wait and do the drying thing. Get a little bit of green, of stronger green right around my base. Before it dries, I'm going to give a good green indication down there. Even though, I'm seeing more red actually, but ooh, that's strong. So what have I done? I need to dilute this down with more red and make that less green. And see, that red went super strong. Okay, it's a play back and forth. How am I going to get it not too red, not too green? And I can add that right in to reduce some of that greenness. I'm going to stop. I need to stop or else I want to do just a little bit of indication. And that shadow mask is going to get a little more red, but I want to keep that red less prominent because when I squint at it, it's shadow. And I'm going to do the drying layer after layer, come back through. I'm going to keep going with this. I want you to keep going because you're going to be working at your own pace. You're going to have to stop at different times that I have to stop. You're going to have to let it dry. You're going to be working and go, no, I need it to dry. Things are happening. And you're going to just come and go. It's just going to layer. So I'm going to let you go from here. I'm going to let you have at it. I want you to do, just like always, I want you to do multiple fruits. Get different colors of fruits if you can too, but keep your box set up. Keep thinking about your background and your complementary colors and just have some fun. And if it doesn't look just so, we're trying to get some realism, which is why we concentrated on those parts of the shadow and parts of the light. But use the watercolor for what it is and let it blend, let it bleed sometimes, because that's what makes it interesting and that's what makes it wonderful. Okay, have fun. Keep at it. It's not gonna look good right at the beginning. You're very new at this. I want you to fall in love like I have. Find the joy in it. Find the love of this drippy, colorful stuff. Water is gonna behave and have a mind of its own, but you're going to start to really enjoy it. Don't give up. You got this.